By the time most people heard the phrase Ohio House of Horrors, the story had already become one of the most disturbing child neglect investigations in recent American memory. The headlines were everywhere. 16 children. A small village in southern Ohio, 4 adults arrested, and a home that investigators said contained conditions so severe that veteran law enforcement officers struggled to describe what they had seen. But this story is no longer just about the day the authorities arrived. It is about the years before that moment, the warning signs that appeared and disappeared, the systems that failed to connect, the neighbors who saw fragments but not the full picture, and the difficult question that continues to haunt Vinton County. How did 16 children live for so long in conditions that officials later described as catastrophic, while remaining largely invisible to the world around them? As of July 2026, the criminal case against Elizabeth Siders, Gary Siders Jr., Gary Siders Sr., and Christina Siders remains ongoing, and all defendants are presumed innocent unless proven guilty in court. What follows is a reconstruction of the known facts, based on court records, law enforcement statements, and verified reporting. On the morning of June 30th, 2026, investigators executed court-authorized search warrants at a residence on Omer Street in Hamden, Ohio, a village in Vinton County. The warrants were part of an ongoing investigation that officials have said originated from allegations unrelated to human trafficking. Inside the home, authorities found 16 children ranging in age from approximately 18 months to 18 years old. According to statements from the Ohio Attorney General and the Vinton County Sheriff's Office, the children were living in conditions that required immediate medical intervention. Several were transported to hospitals in the Columbus area, and some were transferred to higher-level trauma facilities for urgent care. Investigators described the residence as severely unsanitary and overcrowded. Prosecutors later alleged that many of the children had been confined to a single 12 by 12-foot room for extended periods of time. Authorities also alleged that numerous children showed signs of profound developmental, educational, and social deprivation. Within hours of the raid, 4 adults were arrested: Elizabeth Siders, the children's mother; Gary Siders Jr., the children's father; Gary Siders Sr., the paternal grandfather; Christina Siders, the paternal grandmother. Each was charged with 16 counts of child endangerment under Ohio law. Investigators did not use that phrase lightly. During public briefings, officials described conditions that they said were among the worst they had encountered in their careers. Ohio Attorney General Andy Wilson stated that some of the children appeared almost feral, not as a medical diagnosis, but as a description of the extreme level of social isolation and neglect investigators believed they were observing. One allegation drew particular attention. Prosecutors said the eldest child, an 18-year-old, could not write her own name. Authorities also said that some children had little or no ability to communicate verbally and lacked basic educational skills that would normally be expected for their ages. Vinton County Sheriff Ryan Kane made another striking statement, saying that livestock are often kept in better conditions than what investigators found inside the home. Perhaps the most alarming assessment came from officials who said that, based on the children's medical condition, they believed 1 or more children could have died if intervention had been delayed much longer. One reason this case shocked the nation was the sheer number of children involved. Authorities said the siblings ranged from 18 months old to 18 years old, representing nearly 2 decades of births within the same family. Public records and family accounts indicate that Elizabeth Siders, who was 33 at the time of her arrest, had become a mother as a teenager and continued having children for many years afterward. Following the rescue, all 16 children were removed from the home and placed in state custody while receiving medical evaluations and ongoing care. Because the children are minors, authorities have released limited identifying information, and their names have generally not been made public. As reporters began examining the family's history, a troubling pattern emerged. Court records showed that in 2021, Elizabeth Siders and Gary Siders Jr. had faced truancy-related charges involving 6 of their children. According to those records, the children had not attended a single day at Attaville Elementary School. School officials reportedly sent notices to the family, but the situation was never resolved. The case was ultimately dismissed in early 2022 after authorities were unable to locate the parents at their listed residence. In hindsight, many observers have pointed to that episode as one of the clearest missed opportunities in the entire timeline. What remains uncertain is whether the family's frequent moves, lack of stable records, or other factors prevented agencies from recognizing the full extent of the problem. That question has become central to the public conversation. Investigators later discovered that many of the children had little documented interaction with schools, doctors, or child protection agencies. Some reportedly lacked consistent educational or medical records. Officials also said that the children were not enrolled in the local school system at the time of the rescue. Neighbors interviewed after the arrests often described the family as private, isolated, and rarely seen. Some said they occasionally observed children in vehicles or brief public encounters, but few appeared to understand how many children were living inside the home or what conditions existed there. One of the most unsettling aspects of the case is that the house was not hidden in a remote wilderness. It stood in a residential area, in a small community where people generally know one another. And yet, according to investigators, 16 children spent years largely beyond the reach of the institutions that are supposed to notice when children disappear from public life. As journalists dug into the Siders family history, another complicated picture emerged. Reports indicate that Elizabeth Siders married Gary Siders Jr. when she was very young and soon became a mother. Relatives later described a difficult upbringing and a long dependence on the Siders household. Those details do not excuse the allegations now facing the adults, but they do suggest that the roots of the case may extend far beyond the events of 2026. Investigators have not publicly alleged a trafficking operation, and prosecutors have repeatedly stated that this is considered an intra-family abuse and neglect case, not a human trafficking investigation. Many early reports focused on the children's parents, but the presence of the grandparents in the home raised additional questions. According to authorities, Gary Siders Sr. and Christina Siders also lived at the residence and were charged alongside the younger couple. Prosecutors allege that all 4 adults shared responsibility for the children's welfare. That allegation is significant because it suggests that investigators believe the conditions were not hidden from other adults in the household. Whether prosecutors can prove that claim beyond a reasonable doubt is a question for the courts. Among the most alarming revelations were the statements about the children's physical condition. Officials said that 7 children were initially taken to hospitals in Columbus, and 2 were flown to Level 1 trauma centers for more advanced treatment. Authorities have not publicly released detailed medical records, but they described the children as being in urgent need of care. Those statements helped explain why investigators viewed the situation as more than a typical neglect case. In the eyes of the law enforcement, this was a rescue operation as much as a criminal investigation. Vinton County is one of Ohio's smaller counties, and local officials quickly acknowledged that caring for 16 medically and psychologically vulnerable children would strain available resources. In response, the state announced approximately $1 million in emergency assistance to support the children's care and related services. Residents of Hamden expressed a mixture of grief, anger, and disbelief. Many struggled to reconcile the quiet image of their community with the allegations emerging from the investigation. For some, the hardest realization was not that evil existed somewhere far away, but that profound neglect could develop in a house that people passed every day. In the days after the arrests, all 4 defendants appeared in court and entered not guilty pleas. Bond was set at $300,000 for each defendant. Defense attorneys have challenged some of the prosecution's characterizations of the case. Counsel for Elizabeth Siders argued that she should not be described as pure evil and sought a reduction in bond, emphasizing that she had no prior criminal record and wanted to reunite with her children. Prosecutors, meanwhile, have indicated that additional charges remain possible as investigators continue reviewing evidence and medical findings. As of mid-July 2026, preliminary hearings had been waived, and the case was moving toward grand jury review and further proceedings. Of all the facts released publicly, one detail continues to resonate more than any other. Authorities say the oldest child was unable to write her own name, not because she was too young, because investigators allege she had never been given the education, support, or opportunities that most children receive as a matter of course. That single allegation transformed the case from a story about a filthy house into a story about lost childhoods. It suggested years of isolation so profound that basic milestones of development had never been reached. The Siders case has already prompted difficult conversations across Ohio and beyond. How can children disappear from educational systems for years? What happens when families move frequently and leave incomplete records behind? How should agencies share information when truancy, medical neglect, and welfare concerns appear in separate places but never fully connect? And perhaps the hardest question of all, what responsibilities do communities have when something feels wrong, but no one can see the whole picture? Those questions do not have easy answers, but they may become one of the most important legacies of this case. America has seen notorious family abuse cases before, from California's Turpin case to earlier captivity and neglect investigations in other states. What made the Ohio case different was the combination of scale, duration, and apparent invisibility. 16 children allegedly lived for years in a home that investigators described as dangerously overcrowded and unsanitary, while remaining largely absent from schools, medical systems, and public life. For many observers, that raised the unsettling possibility that similar children could be hidden in plain sight elsewhere. While the criminal proceedings will determine the legal responsibility of the adults, the larger challenge now concerns the children themselves. Experts in trauma, child development, education, and social services will likely be involved for years. Children who experience severe neglect often require extensive medical care, educational support, and long-term psychological assistance. Public officials have said their immediate priority is stabilization and treatment, not publicity. And in many ways, that may be the only hopeful part of this story. For the first time in years, the children are no longer hidden. When the phrase "House of Horrors" first appeared, it sounded like another sensational headline destined to fade. But weeks later, the case remains difficult to shake. Not because of the shocking photographs, not because of the courtroom drama, and not even because of the number 16. It lingers because the allegations point to something far more unsettling, the possibility that an entire world existed inside that house, a world where children grew up without the protections that most people assume are automatic: school, medical care, social contact, basic dignity. Investigators say those protections failed. The courts will determine who is legally responsible for that failure. But the broader question belongs to all of us. How many warnings must appear before a child becomes visible? And how many can disappear before anyone notices? Those are the questions that remain long after the headlines fade. And they are the questions that will likely define the legacy of the 2026 Ohio House of Horrors case. If you've been following this case and want careful, fact-checked coverage of major investigations and unsolved mysteries, please subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications for future updates. This video is based on publicly available court records, official statements from Ohio authorities, and reputable news reporting available as of July 2026. The investigation remains ongoing, and all defendants are presumed innocent unless and until proven guilty in a court of law. The purpose of this video is to provide factual, educational commentary on a matter of public interest, not to determine guilt or innocence.